Today, I'm so excited because you guys all know that once a month I have a special guest. And I've been so blessed to be booked every month. But this month is a special one because she's a returning guest and she is also a Latina podcaster and she is also a fellow Latina author. So this woman is a powerhouse in her own right, and I would say a little bit of an activist when it comes to standing up for bullying and teaching parents how to handle the child, the situations at school and all of that. So everybody, welcome Dali from Dali Talks. I am so incredibly grateful to have you here. ¿Cómo estás, amor?
Oh, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Estoy muy bien. Gracias. It's so nice to be back.
I know. I have some great questions for you today, but tell us a little bit about you, a little bit of background. I know that, and throw in your military and all that good stuff. Okay,
Yes,
so give us a little bit about you, Dali.
of course. So I am Nicaragüense. I came to the US at the age of 7. I joined the military 13 days after graduating high school, became a mechanic because I wanted to do things that were not very common for girls to do. I wanted adventure because I thought when I'm old, I want to tell some cool stories about like what grandma did. So that was my mentality at 18. And yeah, and I throughout the years I was bullied and then I experienced work harassment. So I learned how to, advocate for myself and for my soldiers. And then later, for my child and other kids at school. And I pretty much took this as a personal like mission to learn more about it and educate other parents because I realized I thought I was educated on how to properly report and advocate, and I wasn't. And so years after I did that with my child, I created the Diversity and Anti-Bullying Academy, which is a series of workshops for adults who take care of kids or who look after kids. So teachers, educators, whether it's at a daycare or a rec center, library, wherever. And I've authored 5 publications, 5 books. I'm a podcaster, have Dali Talks, the podcast. And let's see what else. I have 2 kids. Well, my 2 kids are now 18 and 19. And I'm currently living in Maryland, but I have provided workshops in person and virtually in Canada, the US, and Guatemala. And I'm trying to expand to other countries. So,
Yay, take me with you. I fit really nicely inside the suitcases, you know? I'm little. I've done yoga before. I'm an ex-dancer. Me hago chiquita, así como el chorrito.
you don't even need to do that. Yo te llevo. Let's go. I have a trip coming up to the UK in September, so I'm excited about that.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah.
How fun. God bless.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, Mama. So let's get started here. I want to ask you some hard questions.
Let's go for it.
And okay, so you said you were a mechanic, right? And so from army mechanic to podcast host, Dali, you served 10 years, mommy. You served 10 years in the military as a mechanic and a drill sergeant. Ooh, that used to be what they called me when I was teaching aerobics, right? I
Oh
was
my
teaching
gosh.
aerobics and spin and all of that stuff. And that's what they used to call me. Oh no, we don't want to take the class. She is that drill sergeant, right?
You're bringing them
And
down.
right. And now you're a bullying prevention educator, podcaster, reaching parents from across the country. And let me ask you, really pointed, what was the defining moment that made you say, this is my calling?
Um, you know what? I don't think there was a defining moment. I think there were a series of things that happened over the
Mm.
years. And I just realized that I just have like this sense for justice. It really bugs me to see people getting screwed just because of these misconceptions or biases or prejudices, because that's where bullying or any type of harassment comes from. It's like this idea that people have, and sometimes they don't think about that, right? So um, I guess the ones that would stick out would be in the military. I had to stand up for myself. There was this two events that happened that were pretty big, and it was scary because in the military you're taught to just follow, do what you're told to do, and don't question it. And I did question it, and I challenged it, and I was a new sergeant, a new leader, so, and very young too, so it was kind of like, y esta que piensa, she está chiquita, she's young, and aquí está preguntándome. I'm like, I'm the senior officer. How dare she ask me about this? And I called them out on some unethical things that were going on. I was really bugged out about it. So that was a whole nother element, because there's one thing about like challenging because you think something is not right, or it could be better, but questioning somebody's integrity and their ethics and morality is different. So it was intense. And I'm glad I did it, because that was kind of like one of the moments where I was like, oh my gosh, todavía estoy viva. Oh my gosh, like I was so scared. It's crazy because in your mind, and I tell people this, that I have a very like beautiful production studio in my head that creates these images, these illusions, these movies of me dying or something.
I think I have that same disease.
Yeah, Dali Talks Productions. I have so many movies in there. They're like dramas and mysteries. Pero, like I was like, oh my gosh, I survived that. And I didn't lose my rank, because, when we speak up for ourselves, whether it's at school, at work, at church, wherever, especially if it's at work, it's like you are kind of risking your job, which messes with your money, which messes with your livelihood. So, and the other thing, I think that was the other pivotal one, was um, watching some of my soldiers also get harassed and get passed over because of dumb things. It just made me so angry that there was just really amazing people that do such a great job, and because of harassment,
Mhm.
you lose such great people in the workforce. And then the third thing, of course, was my child. When she was 5, she was bullied, and
Mm.
the school just didn't know what to do, and they kept saying policies, policies, we got to follow policies and protocols. And at the time I was already in study mode because I was in my master's program. Ironically, my concentration was social policy and leadership. So I was like, wait a minute, if I'm studying this, let me go read this policy and see how it's supposed to work versus how it's being implemented and the results it's
Mhm.
producing.
Mm.
And so that's how it started. And then years later, like 7 years later, I got laid off from my job. I was married back then, and my then husband said, hey, you've been doing this for free with PTA. Why don't you just start asking schools if they'll pay for it? So you can just get paid for it and start a business. And I was like, you know what? That's a crazy idea, but let me try it. And and I, of course, I got shot down at first. Principals were laughing at me, but then I went to the school district and I was like, hey, I want to pilot this for free for you guys. Anytime you tell a school free, they're like, okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And much to my surprise, llegaron los padres con los hijos, and they brought grandma and grandpa and a few of the husbands, and it was just packed. And I was very surprised because it was over the summer. It was at 9 a.m. and I was like, nadie va a venir. Everybody's going to want to sleep in. And I learned a few things. I learned, number one, I am not cut out to teach children. I am too dry, too boring for them. I'm not entertaining enough. So I stick with my human adults. That's my people. So, because I also go really in depth with like grown up conversations, like, okay,
Right.
¿qué vas a hacer if the school principal or the superintendent are not, like, and and then throwing in things like IEPs, like kids are not gonna listen to anything about IEPs, and like, or Title I, or civil rights, or
Right.
legal things like that impact how schools are supposed to operate and provide safety and education for kids. So yeah, I had a few pivotal moments there.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. And it's so funny because I relate to, what you said, because as a principal, yeah, but I am of the other, probably because of where I came from, embedded in the, educational system. But I enjoyed the kids better. And it was like, okay, I'm not going to do the adults and, unless there's kids around. Right. And then I would, get the kids involved and they would get their parents involved. So I'm better at the kid thing.
More power to you. I do not have an entertaining bone in my body for children.
Oh, goodness. Well, so that's amazing. So now you are just you're from what I'm gathering and everything that you said, you are more than just a parent message, right? Your podcast right now has a core message. I've heard it. It's beautiful. A core message is that parents are individuals with their own dreams and goals, not just caretakers. I was a caretaker, so it was, I know how that goes. But as Latina mujeres, as Latina women, as Latina mujerpreneurs, we're often conditioned
Mhm.
to put ourselves last.
Yep.
So how do you help your listeners reclaim their own identity without the guilt?
Well, first of all, I tell them don't feel guilty because you are first and foremost a human being, an individual. You were an individual before you had children,
Right.
and you're going to be an individual after your kids move out of the house. Um, so I decided, because at first when I started the podcast, I was like, okay, I'll teach parents more about bullying on here. Pero me di cuenta de que they needed more than that because again, we're caregivers. We forget ourselves. One of the reasons why I left the military is because of that idea that is inculcated into us about everybody else first, you're last. And that is supposed to give you like, I don't know, more value, and it's supposed to be very honorable, and it's like all this stuff, right? It's like, which is cool. All right, cool. But it's also like una pendejada, to be honest, because you can't abandon yourself and expect people to for you to help them fully, because if you can't do it for yourself, you can't do it for others. And so I remember speaking to a lot of parents and they were frustrated, and I knew that they needed a sense of self and identity aside from mom or wife. And nuestra cultura nos dice de que, you're no, like focus on the family, but you can do both. It's not ever going to be perfect, of course. Just like even if you focus on the whole family, what are you losing? You're losing yourself. If you focus on both, you're not going to be a perfect parent. You're not going to be a perfect individual, but at least it'll be like more, maybe a little more even. Because I see too many parents that struggle because everything's about everybody else except them. And so when it comes to advocacy, you sometimes don't even have the capacity to
Mhm.
effectively do it because you're over there betting for everybody else and you leave yourself. Or sometimes, because in nuestra cultura, you're taught also not to argue. And part of that is very dangerous because if you can't argue, if you don't know how to defend yourself properly and effectively, then how are you going to advocate for your children? There's so many parents that I saw whose kids were being bullied or whose kids were lacking certain things at the school, and the parents would not say anything because la cultura teaches you to like, no,
Yeah.
don't say anything, just go, just do your best, don't, no los molestes, whatever. And I'm like, that's not advocacy, that's not empowerment. So I want to empower parents by not just being parents but individuals. So on my podcast you'll hear a lot of conversations about so many different topics, about entrepreneurship, about IEPs, about bullying, about divorce, about um, vacationing and the impact on self and the family on that. So many different aspects that make you that human being that you need to be in order to be empowered, not just for yourself, but for your children, your family, your community. So that's my long answer to your question.
No, that was good. And then it's like you're reading my mind. You're being clairvoyant along with me. Um, so in your podcast, I noticed that you choose the hard topics, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
when I coach the people, I coach business owners, right? Mujerpreneurs, seasoned women, and sometimes I have to throw in some mindset things because as a cultura, we all have these, I would say, these blocks on moving forward, right? And so you in your podcast, you don't shy away from heavy conversations. I've heard you in some of your episodes, you talk about domestic violence, you
Mhm.
have talked about healthcare crisis, you've talked about divorce. How do you decide the topics that your audience needs to hear, even when they might not be searching for those topics?
That's a great question. Usually, I
I
think
like that when people say that's a great question. It's like, okay, why'd you
yeah.
ask me that one?
No, it's like, you know what? It's actually it comes from conversations con la gente. Like if
Hmm.
we're talking about like and I belong to networking groups, right? So I'm listening to people and their needs. And so if I'm listening to people navigating divorce, and I was like, you know what? That's a great topic. I just went through a divorce a few years ago. And so I remember how hard it was for me to understand the whole thing and how it works and how different it can be for people now that I have been through it. So in just talking to other people and they're like, yeah, so and so. I'm like, let me talk about that. That's a need. That's a need. And also I like taboo topics or like the topics that people don't like to talk about because the Latino culture is very shh, no hables de eso. And I
Yeah,
want to break
yes.
that. I want to break that. Like they shy away from sexuality, divorce, finances, ¿qué más? Like just family issues. Like I wrote a blog post about cutting off family members because I get a lot of criticism because I don't speak to some family members and people just assume these things. I'm like, let me go to that and let me clarify it. Let me tell you, like when it comes to any person cutting off a family member, it's not a matter of I just made up my mind overnight. This is a years in the making where you're trying to, so I talk about those topics because I want people to number one, learn from it, understand how complex it is, have empathy, and that if you end up in that situation, don't have any shame or guilt over it because this happens so often we just don't talk about it. Hasta lo del dinero. Like I've been through the foreclosure process. I was able to save my house. I'm not ashamed of it. Years ago, I would have been. But I learned so much and I'm like, you know what? This is amazing. I was able to keep my house. This is how I did it. So like the more I guess hush hush people want to be about it, the more I want to talk about it so that we can destigmatize it and show people how normal it is and how often it happens in nuestra con nuestra gente with everybody because there's no point in going through a hardship and not being able to ask questions because you're just losing opportunity to get to the solution faster and smoother.
I like that. Get to the solution smoother and faster. I
Yeah.
like that. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's important.
Yeah.
So your podcast, my podcast tends to be, for the female and all the ups and downs, as in networking. For an example, is one woman, she was like, oh yeah, I sell everything, I have all of these little knickknacks and everything, I don't have a real store, I just sell them all on Amazon. And I said to her, oh well, you don't have an e-commerce store, or and she was like, what's that, right?
Mhm.
And I said, do you realize, I said, it's not mathing out if you, because then I questioned her, being the math teacher I was, algebra, right? Okay. So I go, it's the math is not mathing out.
Mhm.
Amazon is taking 40% of what you're,
Yeah,
of the product that you're selling. 40%.
that's
That's
a
a
lot.
big chunk.
Yeah.
I said, now, when I first started real estate, yeah, you walk into a real estate and they say, okay, you're on a 60-40 split. And
Mhm.
after your first house, then I'll give you a 70-30. And then after the next 10 houses, then we'll talk about the 80-20, right? And it's like, oh, dang. So, when people, I understand, it's not correct for them to do that, but people need to know, or mujeres that I talk to, they need to know a little bit more about what's out there if they're really going to be an entrepreneur. And we have a tendency, if you take a look at the statistics as Latinas, we are the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs in the market today, have been since 2011. And
Mhm.
we're just gaining steam. It's not going down. Um, and so it's just interesting. But where this is going is you came from a military service, moved to education and advocacy, built a media platform. And from what I hear from you and myself, I think together we're into servant leadership. Showing up in your work as a podcaster, as an entrepreneur, excuse me. And so when you are on your mic, what does it mean to you to serve the people?
Honestly, it is sharing information that they would never have thought of asking. And I,
Mhm.
I do that for this reason. I was having a conversation as a teenager with my mother, and she was just randomly saying stuff. But for some reason, esto se me pegó. She said, Dali, listen to old people. They know what they're talking about. They can save you hardships. And I don't know why that's just, I was like, oh. And so I have always had high respect for older people because La Cultura teaches you, respect your elders.
Right.
But when she said that, I don't know why it resonated. I think it was because growing up was really hard for me. It was not a very good childhood. And I really wanted my adult life to be different. And
Mm.
so I took that seriously, although she probably to this day doesn't even know that stayed with me. And I've been the rule follower my whole life.
Mm.
And there came a point in my life where I kind of got fed up and I was like, what the heck? Like I followed the rules. I've
Mhm.
done what I'm supposed to and stuff is not working out and I was angry. Um so wait, I'm going down on a tangent. No, but what was the question again?
Hey, that's okay. It's just okay. What does it mean to you to serve through your mic?
Oh, right. Yeah, the information. So I love giving people information that they may have not thought of because I remember thinking, dang, had I known X, Y, and Z,
Mm.
I would have made different choices. Maybe my life would be better. Quien sabe? Who knows? But let me put this out there because, like, for example, when I joined the military, I did not know that there were three routes for your career. There was warrant officer, officer, and non-commissioned officer. And I didn't know the difference between going to the academies or going to college first. And then, like I didn't know any of that.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
also didn't know that for my job, I could have like gone the next week and selected a totally different job because it would have had different offers because people come
Ah.
in and out of the military every single day. So slots become open and closed. I had no idea. I didn't even know that the military offered every single job you can see in the civilian sector. So I could have become a linguist, a firefighter, a pilot.
Oh, a
I mean,
linguist.
yeah, I love languages. So part of what I do on the podcast is I have career pathway series where I invite people and I'm like, let's talk about how you got to do what you do today.
Okay.
Porque when you ask the majority of our kids and Latinos, they only name certain careers. And I'm like, you're limiting yourself. because there are so many other careers within, say, like aviation. I met the first Latina pilot for the Air Force, and she happens to also be the first Latina pilot for American Airlines. I was having
Wow.
a conversation with her, and she lives in San Antonio. And I was like, Olga, so like, how did you get into this? And she's like, pilots, that's not the only thing you can do in aviation. They have designers, they have marketing people, they have this and that. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. I don't know why I never. She's like, the people that que inventan like the drop down thing to, breathe or whatever, they have people for everything. Así de que hay que pensar outside of that box. So, and I love that. I love that. And I share that with people on the podcast or through conversations or on my books, because I realize now how limited my thinking was,
Yes.
because I wasn't asking the right questions, because I didn't know I should have asked different
Mm.
questions. So hopefully my podcast or conversations that people hear with me will spark a different idea or other questions to ask. And I'm a very inquisitive person. Like I research everything. Like I was researching all the anatomy of the rocket, the Artemis. I can tell you about like how many miles there are of roads in the United States. And like my kids are like, they call me Hey Dali instead of like Hey Google or Hey Siri. They make fun of me because I'm always making I'm looking up stuff, and like a friend calls me, the data bee. Um, and it's crazy because as a kid, I just thought I was so unintelligent. I thought I was not very
I
smart.
think we all do, right? I think we all do. But yeah. And the sad part is that as an educator, when I was an educator, I totally agree with you, because as an educator, when I became an educator, I had no idea there was so many paths that I could take, right? Not just be a teacher.
Right.
And I was just really like, whoa, you can do that, and you can do that, and you can do this, and you can coach over here, and you can do that. And so when I became a college professor, I was always after my my Latino kids, because when I would ask them, what is it that you want to be when you grow up, and what is it that you really would love to do if there was nothing stopping you, no money stopping you, no study stop, and inevitably their answers were like left and right. So that's when I was like, okay, now I need to. So I started podcasting for my students, believe it or not,
Oh,
in 2009.
yeah.
And so that's what I was doing. And then in 2019, it switched over because I became a business coach. Formally became a business coach because my husband's a CFO, and now I've been contracted to speak to them boot camps and teaching business communications and how to write their grants, and how to write their plans, and all of the business plans and all of that. And then it evolved from there. But yes, I believe that we are in the service of entrepreneurship, both you and I, but we're also servant leaders, because um, we don't talk about, I've had people on that say, oh, I talk about whatever it is I want to talk about. And I know that when I formalized my script, my talk, my title, my everything, it's based on what I think my mujerpreneurs need,
Mhm.
right? They need to know this, they need to do that. And so we are servant leaders in the way that we think. Who are we serving, and what would serve them best? I think that's what I got from you, is that that's what you do, is that you
Mhm.
listen to them.
Right.
So all right, let me just ask about your book. So if there is a our Latinas are listening to us right now, there's a message to a Latina that's listening to us on the drive or at her, at her kitchen table with a cafecito, or who has who's been thinking about, maybe I write a book. No, I've never been, so, or maybe I do a podcast, or maybe I do a blog, or maybe I do this, right? And they're all about maybes. So, what would you say to that maybe person? What would you say to her to make her, to give her a piece of advice?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think that we overthink our abilities to do something like writing a book. Everybody has a story that others can learn from, and I would just say, just start writing your stories down. And here's another reason why you should. And I know some people hate that word, but I like to use it. Should, because we've always lived in an era where our stories are not told at all, and when they are told, they're told by somebody else. So
Mhm.
please write your book, because that is a legacy you will leave behind. It is harder to erase, although I know people are banning books right now, pero todavía they're out there.
Mhm.
But when I go looking for self-help books, I mostly find non-Latino books.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I
Yes.
really would love to find more written by Latinos, Latinas, Latinos, Latine. I would love that. So start with your own story, even if it's a personal story of overcoming something with family,
Mm.
how you navigated that. That has value. And it's all about, like, you can tell the same story 10 different ways, but to the right person, the way that you tell it, it'll resonate,
Mhm. Mhm.
because it can be the same situation in a different way, and that might be the one that matches their situation and be like, oh my gosh, I have the answer for this.
Right.
So do it for that reason, because if anything happens, knowledge is something nobody can take away from you. Not and also just note that just because the knowledge is there, it doesn't mean that you're smart. It's about how you use it. You have to learn
Right.
how to use it, because I know a lot of really dumb PhDs and MDs and lawyers and stuff. So you have to. Yeah, the title is good to have, pero también, like, how is that information being used,
Yeah.
and how are you using? Just because you don't have a title, just because you don't have a degree that you went and bought, like everybody else does, going to college, university, because that's what you're doing. You're buying a degree. Um,
Right. Yeah, I
that
do.
doesn't mean, yeah, that doesn't mean that you don't have knowledge of value or intellect, that's on par with people who go out and get those degrees. So yeah, short
Amazing.
stories.
That's really good. That's really good. It's just amazing. Now, just a real quick question on your books. Have you collaborated in any way, or are all just you?
No, I've collaborated. The most recent one is called Awakening Your Power: Real Stories of Women's Empowerment, and that launched September 2nd, 2025. It's
Uh-huh.
an anthology. So, in that one, if you want to read the story about when I, like, one of those pivotal moments when I stood up against that sergeant, um, that story's in there. It's the very last story in the book. But I also co-wrote with my friend Amy Joy in Canada. She's a special education educator. I wrote Confident Bully Proof Kids, a workbook for parents, with prompts and like activities that you can do to learn about bullying prevention, and also so that you can do it with your children. Because I believe in putting something into practice is the best way that you're going to learn it and remember it. And then I have a totally different topic: Speak Up, Take Action, a step-by-step guide to reaching your legislators. So I have been advocating for myself.
There's the social justice.
Yeah. The first time I wrote a legislator was when I was 20. I was
Okay.
in the army, and I was so mad because I got kicked out of housing, and then I was like pretty much homeless. I wasn't getting paid for housing. So I was living in an RV at my friend's property.
Oh
And I was like,
goodness.
this is some crap. I was like, here I am serving the nation,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not getting paid for housing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm writing somebody. So I wrote Senator Barbara Boxer, who was then senator for California, where I was raised. So that's what inspired this book. And then I have a journal called Write Your Dreams into Life, and also Your Guide to Bullying Prevention. I also wrote that by myself. And I wrote, actually, the very first one I wrote was Embracing Differences, 21st Century Women Debunking Stereotypes. And I wrote that because every like Hispanic Heritage Month, you hear the same names over and over. And I'm like, no, I'm putting my friend Olga there. She's the first female, Latina, like pilot. And then I'm putting my friend Stella in there because she's the first Brazilian woman here in the United States to do this thing with the passion fruit at USDA. And then, this was the first female, like, secretary of the Air Force, just like all these people. So I'm a collector of firsts. I'm actually coming out with another book next March for Women's History Month.
Now, do you write through the same? Excuse me for interrupting. Do you write with for the same publishing company?
So I self-publish, and the one, let me see, the Awakening Your Power. That one was through the Passionistas Project, who ended up going through Amazon. Yeah, and I don't go the traditional way because, again, I didn't know this, but like the amount of royalties that you get is super low, and I know that the offset is that they'll promote it and whatever, but it really matters for those who have huge names, like say like the Obamas or like the Cheneys or whatever. But every other average us, you keep more money if you go through your own publishing company. So I've published some through a local printer here near my house. I have Confident Bulletproof Kids is on Amazon. I kind of want to take it off of there because Amazon. But
I know. My books are on there too, and I check them, and it's like, what? They lowered the price on my book. What the heck? At least they could give me an email saying, oh, by the way,
Really?
oh, and
Wow.
now your book is on sale. And it was like,
I better check on mine. I didn't know they did that. See?
oh yeah, they
Yeah.
do that a lot.
I
A
want more
lot.
control. So that's why I self-publish. And when I do self-publishing, I make sure I get an editor because I'm not going to throw out there some book that's all mal escrito, because
Right.
as a reader, I've purchased self-published books that have not been edited, and my gosh, people, it's torture trying to figure out how you meant to say something. I read it
Right.
five different ways. I'm like, did you mean it like this or like that?
Now, on your editing, just in case we have some Latina wannabe authors, when you edit, do you have an editor of choice? And so you've worked with somebody now, I would assume, right? Okay, good. So if somebody wants to reach out to that editor, would you be willing to share the link?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, my editor right now took some time off because she's got a parent that has Alzheimer's, and so it's a
Mm,
full-time caregiving job.
mm,
But the other editor for the most recent book through the Passionistas Project, I can definitely get that information and share it. She was phenomenal. She made sure that this is what I want people to know if you're going to do an anthology ever, whether it's yours or you're joining somebody else's. Make sure that the stories are seamless, so that the book is cohesive, and that you have a professional editor who knows that style of writing, because it makes a difference. There are some editors that edit only like biographies or memoirs or like more academic things. So you actually have to do your research when it comes to editors. You want to make sure that they capture the essence of the book that you want with all the stories. It shouldn't be all choppy from story to story.
right. Well, that's good. So then just send me the link and I'll add it to the show notes.
Yeah.
And Dali, I want to say thank you so much for being here. You have been a wealth of knowledge and fun. And, because what's life if we can't have fun?
Right.
And if anybody here has any questions, you're going to find our links in the description below. If you're watching us on the Coach Marti Angel YouTube channel, remember to subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss a guest, never miss an episode. Once a week, we're here. And then as well, if you're listening to me wherever you listen to your favorite shows, make sure to look at the show notes, because that's where I will post Dali's links. And as always, Dali, it has been an amazing and fun time. And shall we tell them how long it took us to finally get going today?
Yeah,
We
why not?
almost quit, guys.
I know.
Okay, we almost quit. We were supposed to go live at 12, and it's 2 o'clock, and we're barely finishing
I know.
because it was so crazy.
Yeah.
But
Tech
hey,
issues.
technology sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't. But finally, it worked. So, Dali, gracias por estar aquí. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
All right.